Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, how you doing? Welcome into the Computer America Show. Today on the program, we have computer and technology news, a full hour of it, lots of different stories, everything from buildable consoles out of Lego. Yeah, it's a fully working video game system. There's some news about Tesla, of course, as there always is, what Apple's new silicon chips mean for the industry, all that and more here at Computer America. So, of course, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including show notes for past shows, future shows, podcasts, articles, reviews, all that and more. Hey, we try to keep the content coming, and you can definitely check it out there on the website. Be sure to find us on social media at Computer America on all different platforms. And, hey, give us a like, give us a follow, and, hey, just interact with the show any way you feel comfortable, and any way that you do, we definitely appreciate it. So everyone, let's go ahead and get started with today's computer and technology news, and that is of course brought to you by Computer America. Here we go. Okay, so I think that our first story that we're going to do is, this one. And it's a bit on the hardware side, which I definitely appreciate. So much of the news that we talk about is, centered around people and policies and things like that. This one is just strict hardware, and hey, we definitely love improvements of that. So this first story comes to us from TechRadar.pro. saying the incredible vinyl-like super SSDs could make hard disk drives obsolete. So obviously, the conversation between traditional hard drives and SSDs, that's a conversation that we've had so often. I think most people now know the benefits, but if you don't, here we go. SSDs, they're faster. They are a solid-state drive, allows you to access a lot of information instantaneously. Everything is digital. There's no moving parts. Everything is just at your fingertips, ready to go. With the main difference being, of course, the read-write speeds of different drives, and they're generally much faster to access and store data on a computer. Whereas a traditional hard drive or an HDD, those are a bit slower, and a bit slower to access the information, a bit slower to store the information, and that is, of course, because they have physical platters that they actually inscribe the data onto. And, of course, with more moving parts, with reading and writing over the same physical space over and over again, there's also a tendency for them to be a little bit more on the not fragile, but SSDs tend to last a little bit longer, assuming you're getting from a reputable source. Obviously some cheap SSDs won't be able to offer that level of production quality. But regardless, traditional hard drives, the only thing they have going for them is price and size. So I think traditional hard drives are down to like 3 cents or maybe even like 2.5 cents a gigabyte. Tons of storage for a very, very cheap price, whereas traditional where SSDs, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 last time I checked the numbers. I thought it was like 7 or 8 cents, but regardless, it's like 2 or 3 times as much for the same storage space. Obviously, you're going to be able to store a lot more data with a traditional hard drive. So how does this all factor into the story? It factors in because data centers, not the home user. A lot of this isn't about the home user. That's from a consumer standpoint. From a data center standpoint, they need all of the capacity that they can possibly get because they'll find customers for every single gigabyte. But where it comes in is they have all that storage, but then they also need to be able to recall the information as fast as possible. That's why certain applications are still using tape drives. Yes, tape drives just like you would on a VCR, but the giant tape reels. Those are even better for storage, but absolutely abysmal for taking information off of those. So here's this balancing game of price to performance to speed to storage, blah, blah, blah. Now looks like we might have a bit of a breakthrough. Modern hyperscale data centers have infinite appetite for storage, as we just said, which is why the new SSD form factor designed to maximize performance and capacity were introduced in recent years. And if you're watching the video portion, you can definitely see what they look like here. Imagine a giant pressed record. Something round and shiny, almost like vinyl. But of course, this thing is a single SSD platter, or I should say a single SSD drive. It's this thing's massive. They say that with capacity starting at about 50 terabytes using current 3D QLC NAND, such devices could offer unbeatable performance. And that's what you want. You want the form factor, but you also want the performance of an SSD, but you want the capacity of a traditional hard drive so that you can pull things off, but of course store, as in this case, a single one storing up to starting at about 50 terabytes. Obviously, for a consumer, I don't know many people who have 50 terabytes worth of data, let alone the need for even more than that. So here we go. The wafer is to be probed using Kioxia's, which is the name of the manufacturer, super multi-probing technology to discover as well as disable faulty 3D NAND dies, and then attach to a pad with I/O and power connectors. The whole thing should be operated in parallel to extract maximum sequential and random IOPS performance. So IOPS, that's how that's how most hard drives are measured when it comes to speed and performance, is how many operations per second they can process. And that, of course, is anything from storing data to reading the data back, that kind of thing. So it looks like they're going for sequential, means it happens in parallel, happens at the same time. Fancy words for it's going to be super, super fast. So they even have like a little graph here showing what it's going to look like. Wafer, chip, packaging, SSD, computer. All in all, what they're saying here is instead of these wafers, these giant silicon-based memory chips that are then punched out of the wafers and then put into kind of the storage, that you would normally find in a hard drive, they want to take the actual physical wafer, like the very beginning of the whole process of making an SSD, and essentially just slot it into the data center. Obviously, this is maximizing storage space and potentially performance. My question, though, is that it makes a certain amount of sense. It'd be like if consumers want the maximum amount of butter, and the butter manufacturers say, we can ship it in 55-gallon drums of butter, which are then sent for packaging and reprocessing and distribution into a form factor that obviously many consumers out there buy sticks of butter. But then they said there are consumers out there that are just so into butter that they would love the 55-gallon drum of butter. And here you have it. This is the company looking to sell you the 55-gallon drum as opposed to the individual sticks. So think of like Waffle House maybe. They would want 55-gallon drums of butter. Now, with that being said, they described the concept of a wafer-level SSD in a presentation, meaning that this is not a product for on the company's roadmap, but something that they are definitely considering. The biggest problem with this, before we go any further and talk about some of the specs, the biggest problem with this is that, first of all, if a single platter goes out and you're looking at 50 terabytes of data, that's 50 terabytes of data that you suddenly have to recover. And that's a lot. Obviously, redundancy is key, and having hard drives that are maybe in the 1 terabyte, the 2 terabyte, the 5 terabyte, 10 terabyte, whatever, so on and so forth. Smaller increments means that if one of them fails, and every hard drive has a failure rate from the major manufacturers of like a 1%, 1 to 3%, I think is generally the industry accepted hard drive failure rate. And these companies are buying thousands and thousands of hard drives. They go bad all the time because they're used constantly. With these larger platters, they're more expensive, and even though they may perform better, if one of them crashes, it may be a much bigger endeavor to recover all the data and, of course, swap it out for a new part. And the second part that I'm not too keen on is that, well, right now, what's being used in the in the cloud infrastructure, your Amazon, your Googles, whatever, essentially the customers that would be purchasing these, they're very much using the same form factor that you do. Obviously, it would be a little bit different. It would be a higher quality. It would, make sure that it's, whatever specs that they need, but it's still probably a 3.5 inch, 2.5 inch SSD. The form factors are still essentially what consumers are using. This would be an entirely new form factor that all of these data centers would have to switch over to. Obviously, retrofitting existing ones might not make a lot of sense. Maybe building new ones that can actually take advantage of this would be very interesting, but you would need a lot of them to switch over so that you could make this a viable business. So let's talk about some of the specs here. This is obviously a pipe dream, but if it works out, here's the benefits. They say that they produce 1.33 terabit 96-layer 3D QLC NAND chips. A lot of numbers and letters there. Essentially, they measure about 158 millimeters squared and deliver up to a 132 megabyte per second read performance due to the architecture that they use. So they say that approximately 355 of such dies fit on the 300 millimeter wafer. So assuming a yield rate of about 90%, so they're giving about 10% not working or failure, what have you, they say that Toshiba gets around 320 good dies, or about 53 terabytes of raw NAND storage. And of course, with that being said, Toshiba will have even more raw NAND per wafer. What they're saying there is that with the excess of these wafers before they're punched out into individual chips, if they just use the wafer, you get an instant performance boost of about 10%. So with that being said, from storage density point of view, such a server is not going to be a champion, but if you need extreme performance at a relatively low price, a device of such kind could make sense. So there you go. That's the story. And again, you can see that very, very incredible wafer that traditional SSDs would normally, that would be the innards of multiple SSDs. It's an interesting idea. But is it revolutionary? I can't give it to you, TechRadar. It's probably not. It's probably not going to make traditional hard drives obsolete anytime soon. And there's a reason that they're still around, and it's because, hey, they work. They're cheap, and we have the technology figured out. this is I revert you back to my butter analogy when it comes to this. So there you go. Okay, story number 1. Story number 2. A lot of different ones that we could cover. I think we're going to talk about this one. Silicon to silicon. Let's go ahead and talk about Apple real quick. One of the biggest announcements that happened about 2 weeks ago at the Worldwide Developers Conference was that Apple was switching over to their own proprietary chips, that they were going to be using ARM processors instead of the x86 processors made by Intel. And they have been on this road for quite a while now. A couple of years ago, if you recall, I think it was with the iPhone 10, I think. The iPhone 10 was the first one, or maybe it was the iPhone 8, was the first one to have Apple's own proprietary CPUs in them. And now, just about 2 weeks ago, they switched over all of their future Macs. Will no longer have Intel, breaking a 20-year relationship, 25-year relationship between the two companies. I think it was started like 96. But I digress. Apple is going to enter the market and replace Intel. And what that means is that Apple, as far as their operating system is concerned, the way all their hardware works with, interfaces with all their software, they get to optimize for their own. Yeah, they get to optimize for their own software. So it's very interesting. Apple said that they were working on it, and they finally did it. The transition away is probably not that big a deal, though, and which is why I bring up this article from Appleinsider. Apple Silicon will force industry to reconsider use of Intel chips, says ex-Apple executive. No. So Intel knew this was coming, and they had already, made sure that they were, kind of doing their thing. But even so, I think it's important to put Apple into perspective. Yes, they own a dominant share of the mobile phone space. They're a lot, but when it comes to their traditional computers, their laptops, their desktops, their workstations, what have you, they only accounted for about 5% of Intel's total sales. So 95% still went to other manufacturers of other PCs, and really, in recent years, we've even seen kind of like a pent-up demand for more CPUs and more computer parts. That honestly, if Apple, which, hey, let's face it, they're Apple, they probably had first dibs. If Apple isn't going to take them, I'm sure that Intel can find other customers for these, for these processors. And the fact that Apple is just going to create their own, I haven't seen any computer manufacturer say, boy, that is exciting. I can't wait to switch over to Apple's new processor. Not a thing. It's They said that they were going to turn their Mac OS into an operating system that was more like their iPhone, iPad operating system, so that they work more homogeneously. Apps are coming, apps have been transitioning over to the desktop, and the desktop over to the mobile platform for quite a while now. And it's almost like, in my head, this is how I have it shaking out. It's almost like Apple didn't pay attention to what happened with Windows and Windows 8 and 8.1. They are optimizing for mobile, and they're making sure that everything that they run runs seamlessly, which was the motto for Microsoft with Windows 8 and 8.1, was that, regardless of which Windows device you were using, although I don't think anyone actually used the Windows Phone, but regardless of which Windows device you were actually using, you had the same Windows experience with the same applications, the same data, the same saves, the same everything across all of your platforms. Apple is going for the exact same thing, and of course, everything will be proprietary. Everything will work as efficiently and as cleanly as possible. Apple might be able to pull it off better than Microsoft. I am unsure of how that will shake out. But regardless, the consumers made it very clear that a console is not a PC. A PC is not a phone is not anything else. And to make them all look the same and act the same, you are either limiting the PC, or you are cramming too much information into a mobile phone, or you are not optimizing for a console, or laptops are going to drain their battery life much, much faster. There's just no way to make a single operating system that just kind of transcends the device. So, but hey, that's the approach that Apple's using. Now, back to this article from an ex-Apple executive saying that this transition may actually, make others consider, well, is Intel still our best choice? And let's face it, at this point, yes, Intel makes almost every single I think in the mobile space, they're not as prolific as a number of other mobile chip manufacturers. But when it comes to PC and computers and laptops and things like that, Intel devices are just, they're everywhere. They really are. So let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. Apple is seeing the billions of dollars of investment into Apple Silicon as a way to make the Mac better, and power dissipation improvements are anticipated with the A12Z's performance and cool running highlighted against the Intel Core i7 with a TDP of 28 watts. What he's saying there is that suddenly Apple's first PC CPU is somehow better than everything Intel's been doing. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people out there, especially, audience members, if you're listening and you have been following what Intel's been doing. I know that there's a sentiment out there that Intel has been dropping the ball. Their lack of innovation, their lack of being able to put out products that are actual improvements. Most notably, of course, you can look at the desktop CPUs, and where one of their competitors, of course being AMD, was able to bring out the 7 nanometer, the 10 nanometer CPUs before Intel was even off the 14 nanometer. They've been having a really hard time in their research department, but they're still the industry standard. And to see these kinds of improvements coming out of Apple from the get-go, I'm going to kind of wait and see. Obviously, the only place that these CPUs are available are in Apple Minis that they're sending to developers. They're not actually in the hands of people yet. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a new workstation and you're intrigued by the performance increase of Apple, definitely consider waiting until everyday people or benchmarkers, from independent companies and independent researchers actually get their chance at testing those machines. Because Apple is, of course, every company does this, not just Apple, but Apple is tweaking the test to make sure that they are as optimized for the hardware as possible. But in a real world situation, you could see a lot less of a performance increase. So let's go ahead and talk about this executive again. Let's see, and this was former Apple executive Jean-Louis Gassi. And he suggested that this leaves Microsoft with a choice: either forget Windows on ARM and cede modern PCs to Apple, or forge ahead and fix app compatibility problems and offer an ARM-based alternative to Apple's new Macs. And he said, before admitting it's a false dilemma, as Microsoft will forge ahead with repercussions for the rest of the Windows PC industry. He also points out that the disparity was even more embarrassing for Microsoft, as Office was shown to be working on Apple Silicon during the WWDC without issue, which is obviously pointing out that Windows devices or Windows applications work on Apple, but Apple applications don't work on Windows devices. And he's saying that is due to the ARM-based architecture that Microsoft is using. to just say that Apple is really, before they've even sold a single unit, they are now the new industry leaders, and they're going to force the entirety of Intel and Microsoft to to bend and pivot as hard as they can to catch up to Apple. We've seen this a number of times. Apple is not always right. They go off on a tangent pretty often. You can look at a lot of different Apple products that never see that really never catch on. And it's easy to forget them because you just look at the iPad, the iPhone, the iMac, and you say, wow, those are great products. But then you don't remember a number of the weird trackpads and butterfly switches and screen resolutions and just a lot of the weird choices that they made to be quote unquote brave, to quote Apple. I don't think that Apple is really forcing Intel or Microsoft to really reconsider their strategies and their way to approach the x86 chips and the architecture that they're currently producing on. Don't get me wrong, Intel does have a lot of catching up to do. Innovations are not coming at a regular pace out of the Intel labs, but when they do, they will continue to be the industry standard. And I don't see a lot of companies out there really ranting and raving saying, wow, I can't wait for Apple to bring these out, because they just aren't. So there you go. There's story number 2. Apple, I definitely appreciate it. They are trying new things and doing something that only Apple can do, let's face it, in these times, because it takes a lot of capital. It takes a lot of money to invest and make sure that, hey, it takes a lot of time, energy, effort, resources to really develop something like this. And it's something that only Apple could do, and competition is always good. So I encourage them. The article just seemed a little overinflated. So, okay, let's go ahead and continue on here. And there's a couple stories about TikTok. I might kind of loop these together at some point, but I think instead we're going to talk about Lego real quick. We'll keep it light. And check this one out. You thought Legos were the game, and the end result was just kind of something you sat on a shelf and you said, there we go, I built the Saturn V rocket, I built the SR, I built an X-Wing. Building with Legos is the entertainment. But check this one out instead. You are now building your entertainment. The end result is a fully working Nintendo Entertainment System. Actually, I lied. It doesn't actually play games, but it's actually very cute when it comes to it. The entire system, so it doesn't actually play games, although I'm sure that the modding community will certainly be working on that. But these Legos assemble into a Nintendo Entertainment System, a controller with a cable, a game cartridge featuring Super Mario Brothers, and a little square television set that you may remember with the knobs and the dials and the antennas, featuring Super Mario Brothers on the screen. So they say that this is entirely brick built and sadly not a functioning NES, though the photos show a crank on the TV that'll put Mario into motion. So, and of course, if you're watching the video portion, you can see it right there. If not, check out the show notes after the show and we'll have a link to it. From the photos, this looks like a whopping 2,600 piece set. And the TV has an area built in so you can mount Mario from the existing Lego Mario set. German Lego blog Promo Bricks says that the set will cost about $250. It always amazes me how much some of these pre-built sets actually go for. Very expensive. Those prices seem to be in line for what they charge with other sets with similar counts, but I'm sure that we'll get official details here sometime soon. And of course, they even have a little, promo teaser here, and Looks pretty cool. I definitely like it when companies go retro. So there you have it. Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and talk about... Actually, this makes a lot of sense. Super Mario Brothers is Super Mario Brothers, but this one isn't about the game, but rather how much someone paid for the game. Super Mario Brothers is a hugely popular video game, and really almost like a turning point for modern video games when it really broke into the mainstream. You know, everyone played this. If you had a console, people went out and bought consoles for the first time, played it in their homes, and they loved this thing. So check out this one. It's new in case. It's one of the few, because imagine parents buying these for their kids, and not to, kind of store them or save them or preserve them, but to obviously rip up the packaging, get to the game inside, get to the cartridge, and play the game. Now, here we have it, the turning point in modern video games, and yeah, just sold at auction for $114,000. You heard that right. 114,000. $114,000. I know many of you out there, if you remember buying this thing, you are wondering, man, why didn't I leave that in the box, all sealed up, sticker, all that kind of thing. Although this is actually, I think, one of the, this one's actually pretty rare. There was something, you know what, let's go ahead and talk about the article. But yeah, it's a sealed, new in box Super Mario. They said that the online auction surpassed the old record set by a sticker-sealed Super Mario Brothers early last year, and at the time, the seller behind that was a 100,000 edition, said it was probably the wrong move long-term to sell. There you go. So even at $100,000, the gentleman who sold the game said that was the wrong move. Weird. For context, the Guinness Book of World Records has the largest video game collection sold at auction for $750,000 in 2014, where it contained about 11,000 games, including about 8,300 original in their box. Someone just really enjoyed collecting video games. That's what that is. So here we go. They said the Heritage Auctions video game specialist and consignment director who helped shepherd this record sale tells Ars that this 3 code variants of Super Mario Brothers dates back to the mid-1987. That makes it slightly more attainable to find than the earliest test market editions of the game from late 1985 to early 1986, which were only sealed with a small circular Nintendo sticker. And they said that the $100,000 sale from last year came from that batch. That also means that it's not among the very first shrink wrap copies of the game, which came out in 1986. Still, the fact that this copy features a cardboard hang tag inside the shrink wrap speaks to a level of vintage and puts it in a rarefied class. I would suspect that the sealed cardboard hang tag copies, still available today, number in the single digits. So just like anything, that's, there's only, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them in existence, you're looking at a pretty penny. Remaining copies are in good condition to earn a Wada Games certified rating of 9.4 out of 10, and they're even rare. So this one is in almost perfect condition. Saying that in this grade especially, it's quite an impressive piece. Strangely, the addition of the plastic wrap came before the box cutting die was altered to remove the cardboard hang tag. This rendered the functionality of the cardboard hang tag completely useless since it was under the plastic seal. So, yeah, and you can even see the cardboard there behind it. So it had like a hang tag underneath the plastic. Pretty weird. So, with that being said, okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this up real quick. They said that this ultra-valuable copy of the game came from outside the collecting hobby, which she described as a very curious and attic find scenario. And she suspects it was simply purchased in 1987 and put somewhere and forgotten. Whoever had it was lucky enough to keep it in a safe space, and when they told the seller what they actually had, they wanted to be conservative, and I gave them the estimate to not give them false hopes. But then another sealed hang tag copy sold for about $40,000, so if an 8.0 sold for that, then a 9.4 would probably sell for a lot more. And once again, that a lot more was $114,000. Check your attics. I don't know what you have up there, but hey, maybe it's something super, super valuable. All right, everyone. So let's go ahead and continue on here and see what do we have here. Plenty of time to cover all the stories that we want to. Okay, this one seems pretty important. Shipt. If you haven't heard of the service, they, Shipt is the from store to consumer service that Target uses, I believe. And they're changing their pay structure, leading to a walkout on July 15th. So if you are a member of the service and you are hoping to get groceries on that day, might want to schedule it for another day because, hey, things are going to get a little hectic here in a couple of days. They say that workers for the grocery delivery platform Shipt are going to walk off the job and not accept orders on Wednesday, July 15th. And they said that they are moving to an algorithm-based pay structure that will reduce their pay by at least 30%. And that's the interesting part. Up until this point, Shipt members could look at an order, and let's say someone was looking to purchase $200 worth of groceries. The people who pick the groceries, take it, the actual workers would get a percentage of that. 1.5%, 2% of that would be tipped directly to them. And then, of course, you have your delivery fees on top of that. You have your tip on top of that. Things like that. And a person could see, when working for Shipt, exactly how much they were making. And now they're switching over to an algorithm-based pay structure, which is code for, we're not going to tell you how much your delivery is going to pay you, but it's going to be less. And that number comes from test markets that Shipt has already been testing in like 10 different cities. So with that being said, they have a quote here from a group of shoppers who work with Shipt, saying that this seismic company shift is occurring at the same time that its shoppers are already suffering significantly. And at the same time, Shipt, a corporation profiteering off consumer fears during this pandemic, is experiencing obscene increases in its sales. And what they mean there is that grocery delivery services have been booming because people don't want to go out in public due to, obviously, COVID-19. And with the increased revenue, with the increased amount of adoption among users, they're saying that, hey, they're making more money, but now they're actually slashing the pay going to individual gig workers. So they launched a new pay model internally called V2 in a few of its markets near the end of 2019, and they are replacing its previous flat fee model. It will roll it out to a dozen new markets on Wednesday, according to shoppers, which, of course, this Wednesday being the 15th when the walkout will happen. They say that Shipt told the Verge in an email that the new pay structure can better account for the actual effort it takes to complete and deliver orders by factoring in estimated drive time, the number of items in the order, peak shopping windows, and locations. Some orders may pay out differently than before since payment is based on effort and not on the value of the order. Which is a fun way of saying, well, notice there that they never said at any point within that they said the minimum is still going to be there. No. The flat fee really entice people to adopt the platform and say, hey, I can guarantee that if I deliver groceries, I'm going to earn this amount of money. Now here, if it's something simple or just a few orders, they're going to earn significantly less than they did before. So, but workers in the markets where the new pay algorithm was first rolled out reported that their pay was cut between 40 and 50%. The Shipt workers have also complained that shoppers aren't always receiving their tips from customers, and they said that a single grocer in Michigan affected about 700 people. Shoppers claim that the issue is more widespread. So, let's see. So let's go ahead and jump around here, see what's. Let's see. So grocery delivery has boomed during the pandemic, as we said before, but a good fortune has generally not trickled down to the workers. DoorDash has had to address complaints that it was skimming drivers' tips, and Instacart drivers have described a labyrinth of bureaucracy when they tried to claim the hazard pay the company said that it would provide. So what they're saying there, and really, in Shipt's defense, this is an industry standard, and the industry in general needs to be changed from a legislative point or any other market force that they could really put on it. The walkout is a temporary, maybe they'll get their attention, maybe they won't. But unfortunately, that is the nature of the gig economy. You have an almost infinite amount of people that you can draw upon, and it's super convenient for the companies. Super convenient for the grocery delivery companies, the Uber Eats, the drivers, whatever gig economy you can think of, because if you aren't happy earning less than minimum wage, then that's your problem. There will be someone else that will step up and say, I could use some money in my spare time. I'll take that. And having that constant turnover means that they can continue to lower and lower and lower. And of course, they're data-driven companies. Everything is handled within the app. They see exactly how many people are needed for this area. They know exactly how far they can press not just the consumer, not just the users, but also the workers within their app. And they have all the data to back it up and know exactly how much they can cut pay and still keep their business going and make it as profitable as possible. Now, other segments here on the show, we've talked about this before. Almost none of these companies, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, maybe Instacart, almost none of them are actually profitable. Yes, they're seeing incredibly high revenues, but they are still operating on burning wheelbarrows of investor capital. They're trying their best to make this business model work, and the more that they squeeze it from the worker side, pay workers less, have them do more and more work, and take more of the burden on themselves and their cars and their finances. The way I'm afraid that this is all going to shake out, much like it is in California right now, after the California legislator deemed that gig workers were actually employees and not just independent contractors, this business model is unsustainable. Having infinite amount of employees is not something that these companies can really do. So the only reason that this business model exists is because they live in some kind of legal limbo that just hasn't been really patched up and fixed yet. So there you go. It's interesting. I'm obviously, I see a lot of these workers. I talk to a lot of these workers. They see their pay going down, time after time, and yet they really don't have an alternative. Yeah, of course, many of them hold down traditional jobs, but to do this in their spare time, it's, again, either not work or work for a little bit of money. And that's something that everyone kind of has to factor into themselves. Shipt, again, this one in particular is just them moving over to the industry standard that everyone else uses. So you can't really blame them. It's just going to happen. So, okay. There's that story, and I think the next story that we're going to talk about is Tesla, real quick. Tesla, if you haven't been following them, they've been seeing incredible numbers for their stock. They're now valued at like more than a number of their rivals, like every German automaker combined plus Honda. Tesla is valued even more than all of them combined. It's pretty incredible what's happening. Now, with that being said, Tesla, they're making a move with their Model Y, saying that the car maker's latest model is now priced at just under $50,000. It's impressive, for a car company that only sold the Tesla Roadster, which you were looking at. I think they were selling for about $150,000 or like $130,000 when they first came out. From being a premium premier car manufacturer to, of course, selling the Model 3 for like $35,000, it now looks like they are just barely getting their Model Y under the $50,000 mark. The prices are coming down, as with all technology. But of course, this is the car arena. They said that the Model Y just began shipping in March, and earlier this month, Tesla reported better than expected delivery numbers. And for all of its vehicles in the second quarter, so the reason for the price cut isn't totally clear. But it's likely to help boost sales at a time when car makers are feeling the pinch of the economic downturn. That's something that Tesla hasn't really had to concern itself with because, hey, go try to buy a Tesla right now. Assuming you have the funds, the wait list is still like 2 years deep. And Tesla's big problem was never demand. Tesla's big problem was, of course, fulfilling that demand. They said that they cut prices on several vehicles in May, but the Model Y was not included in those reductions. And they said that on July 2nd, despite the temporary shutdown of its Fremont, California factory due to the coronavirus, it delivered 80,000 of its Model Y and Model 3 vehicles and 10,000 of its S and X vehicles. That brought the total up to about 90,000 vehicles delivered, better than the expected 70,000. So, so that's about where we're at there. The Model Y is getting a little bit cheaper. Obviously, $3,000 isn't going to make that much of a difference. $50,000 to or $52,000 down to $49,000. Not the biggest reduction in the world, but hey, something that a few people will definitely be able to benefit from. There you go. Let's talk about podcasting real quick. Obviously, Computer America radio show, but we also do podcasting, and we are distributed on a number of different services platforms. If there's one that we are not on, then hey, let us know. We'll be sure to get our show on there. But check this one out. There's a podcast war going on, and it's all about content. It's all about having the most amount of podcasts, different podcasts, and in some cases, the biggest names in podcasting. And things just took another development, saying that SiriusXM acquires podcast platform Stitcher from Scripps for $325 million, saying that the company already owns Pandora and is now betting big on the podcast wars, saying that podcasting has become something of a almost like a renaissance for radio, and I really do believe that as well. So, thanks to a report from the Wall Street Journal, we knew this was coming. It's official though. SiriusXM is buying podcast platform Stitcher from the EW Scripps company for $325 million, saying that that's considerably more than the $4.5 million Scripps spent to acquire it from Deezer. And that was back in 2016. Deezer owned Stitcher for less than 2 years. Even if you combine it with the $55 million purchase of the mid-roll media that Scripps made the year before, for the investment, SiriusXM gets a popular destination for publishers, creators, and advertisers with both production and distribution capabilities. Something that SiriusXM, satellite radio, obviously I think a lot of people know what that is, but how many people actually have a SiriusXM subscription? This now lets them get into a wider distribution platform, and of course, a ton of new content that they could potentially put up on their existing services. So the podcast wars have heated up over the past several months, saying that the Stitcher produced slate includes Freakonomics, How Did This Get Made, Super Bowl Sunday, from the Oprah Winfrey Network, Office Ladies, Conan O'Brien, Rob Lowe, LeVar Burton, so many more shows. And of course, Computer America, they forgot to list it, but I'll forgive them. SiriusXM doesn't mention making any shows exclusive to its platform, except for the ad-free early access and bonus content listeners who splurge for Stitcher Premium subscription get it all for $5 a month. And with that being said, hey, it's an interesting move. Obviously, Spotify paid record numbers for certain podcasts, namely the Joe Rogan Experience. And yeah, it's not just about how much content you have, but the premium content, the big shows and big names on these different markets. So with that being said, as you might expect, SiriusXM is also keen on Stitcher's advertising abilities. They say that Stitcher offers sales and marketing services that link advertisers and podcasts based on the audience. SiriusXM says that Stitcher is combined with its current ad platform, and it will be able to reach over 150 million listeners. And the company also says that the deal will allow it to better position in the podcast ad market. So, yeah, with that being said, like Spotify did with Anchor, SiriusXM bought podcast hosting, distribution, and analytics platform Simplecast in June to give producers a place to publish and monetize content. Now the company is padding its assets with Stitcher's content and advertising chops. Spotify has spent big on both content and production tools, so SiriusXM has some work to do to catch up. So, podcasting is seeing this second wave where everyone had a podcast. Making a podcast super easy. Anyone could do it, and distributing it is luckily still very easy to do. But now we're seeing big names come in and say, okay, people are listening to podcasts. That's something that hasn't always been the case. And now that they're listening to podcasts, now it's time to start monetizing these, because just like television shows, just like radio shows, just like anything else before it, this is where the people are going. This is the kind of content that they're interested in. Podcasting on different subjects, different topics, and being able to really pinpoint and say, we have an interesting product, but it will only appeal to the tech space. So we'll put it on tech podcast. Things like that are very attractive to advertisers. And of course, hey, it's going to lead to a lot of changes in the way that podcasts are made. So there you go. Time for one, maybe two more stories if we have time. Looks like we're on story number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, now we're on story number 8. Okay. It's either going to be TikTok or no, actually, we'll do this one real quick, and then we'll move on to the touchy subject of, well, Ubisoft. But here we go. If you purchased an iPhone 5, 6, 7, 8, actually, I take it back. It's actually listed in the article here. An iPhone 6, 6 Plus, 6S, 6S Plus, or an iPhone SE that ran iOS 10.2.1 or later before December 21st, 2017, or an iPhone 7 or 7S, or an iPhone 7 Plus that ran iOS 11.2 by December 21st, 2017, then you are eligible for battery gates. If you don't recall what the iPhone battery gate was, really it was like a rock and a hard place, but Apple handled it in probably the worst way possible, but in the most Apple way possible. They didn't tell anyone to avoid phones from crashing. on the new iterations of iOS, because Apple has this thing about making sure that every device is on the exact same operating system with security updates and all that kind of thing. I get it. Much easier to develop for, much easier to patch and update and things like that. But to preserve some of its older models, which they claimed were because batteries didn't have as much energy as they used to when they were first purchased, they were throttling the performance of the hardware to make sure that the battery life stayed consistent. And it would reduce the amount of crashes when updating to newer versions of iOS. That, again, you were pretty much forced to update. If you have an iPhone, you have to update to the latest iOS. Or things just stop working. So Apple was in this tricky situation, and the way that they handled it was that they were shadow throttling, and users found out. They were able to kind of compare notes and say, by updating to this version of iOS, performance went down by 15%, and Apple finally had to come out and say, all right, we throttled your phone so that it could run later versions of iOS. And of course, people took that as, we throttled your older iPhones so that you would be more interested in upgrading to a newer phone. That's how people took it, and rightfully so. Artificially crippling existing phones so that you could sell newer phones doesn't seem that far-fetched for a company that makes a majority of its money by selling phones. So that was the whole situation. Now here we are, and it's finally come to this point, saying that Apple agreed to pay out a maximum of $500 million. And here's the sad part. Just like Engadget, just like so many other Apple settlements out there, the company will provide a cash payment of about $25 per eligible device, though that number can go down based on the total number of approved claims if they exceed the $500 million cap. Don't you wish you had Apple lawyers that you could, artificially handicap millions of phones, potentially upsetting millions of customers, and they're like, well, if everyone who is wrongfully damaged claims for compensation, then we're just going to pay less to everyone instead of paying more for themselves. They said that the only reason for doing so would be if you plan to sue Apple directly about the battery management issue, which I don't think a lot of people at this point are planning to individually sue Apple. They said that according to the FAQ on the site, which will go ahead and include this article here, saying who's in the settlement, what you get, how to submit a claim form, things like that. It's all there on the website, but again, you're opting out of the ability to sue Apple directly and instead get a $25, if you even get it at all, which you can kind of point to the Equifax scandal. So many people were damaged by that. They said you get like $100, and so many people claimed the $100 that now everyone's going to get like $40 out of Equifax. Same thing here with Apple. And, I think a lot of people were affected by this whole thing. So Apple, of course, apologized for the iPhone slowdown in late 2017, and they said that they offered battery replacements at a reduced cost and gave customers a way to disable battery management. And aside from the resulting public outcry and many new headlines about the issue, Apple also investigated by several countries over the iPhone battery decision. All in all, Apple got off pretty easy, but I hope that they learned that transparency is probably better than some behind the scenes, just make it work magically approach. Just all they had to do was say, hey, here's a new option, battery management. If you're experiencing crashes, then this could resolve them. And instead, no, they just made everything happen by default. So there you go. I think that's about all the time that we have here for the show today. So some of the stories that we didn't get to include, Ubisoft, and their sexual harassment investigation has 3 more executives leaving the company. They have about 18,000 employees worldwide, and they had a number of allegations against a number of executives. It's kind of hard to be surprised that video game companies, traditionally male dominated and male dominated workforces, are being a little are found to be sexist. We've seen this from a lot of other gaming companies, including Riot Games and the like. That's hey, it's finally nice that people are being brought to task. So there's that story. There's also Google will be investing about $10 billion into India and a lot more. So everyone, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for tuning into the Computer America Show. If you want to find out more, computeramerica.com. Highly encourage you to go check that out. We'll have the show, past shows, future shows, and more up there. Check it out, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.